Is this the FX3 killer? Nikon and RED's first complete camera collaboration is here, and with RAW video recording in both RED RAW and Nikon RAW, the excellent autofocus you love from Nikon, 32-bit float internal recording with no adapter required like Panasonic does, and one of the largest screens on a mirrorless camera, all for the price of $2,200. This is the new ZR, and it's looking insanely competitive. But without a fan, how will it handle filming in high heat situations like an outdoor wedding ceremony? I'm going to be telling you everything you need to know and answering those questions right now, because in this video, I'm going to be reviewing the ZR from the perspective of a wedding / documentary / commercial filmmaker and telling you if you should buy this camera. Also, for the sake of ethics, I want you to know this video is not paid or sponsored by Nikon or RED, but they did fly out to show me this camera, and they have no say in any part of this review, and the first time they see it is the first time that you see it whenever I post it to YouTube. Anyways, getting right on to the review then. Whenever you first hold the body of this camera, it's going to feel like other Nikon mirrorless cameras more than how it feels like a RED camera, considering that RED cameras are usually a box that you attach a lens to and then have to fully rig out with rails and handles and a screen, etc. This is more like a traditional mirrorless camera that has a grip and a screen, and it's basically everything that you need. You do not need to rig it out if you don't want to. You can just hand hold it like a normal camera. And let me just say, that's going to be a theme throughout this review. This camera feels more like a Nikon camera than it does a RED camera. It's not a 50-50 split between these two companies making this camera. It feels more like it's 70% a Nikon camera and 30% a RED camera. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but if you're coming from a RED camera and you're considering purchasing a ZR as a B cam or C cam, you're going to have to get used to how this camera is a bit different than what you may be used to. Continuing this talk about the body of the camera now, there are two things that you need to be aware of, one of which is awesome and the other which is less awesome, and honestly one of the weirdest things that I've seen on a camera in years. But let's start with the awesome. The camera body is more rectangular with less of a hand grip, but that makes sense considering this is a camera that you're going to be holding less up to your face like a traditional photo camera and more like a video camera that you hold down at your chest. On the back of the ZR, you're going to find a relatively huge flip-out screen. For context, a screen on the FX3 or A7S III, for example, is 3 inches in size. This is a 4-inch screen, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it feels so much larger, and it is significantly easier to use and see. Just like with the FX3 and Nikon's other newer cameras as well, the screen can flip out and rotate around. Unfortunately, it's not a fully articulating screen where it can tilt up and down also without needing to flip out first, which is a bummer, but not a deal breaker in my opinion. Regardless, the screen is fantastic. It's sharp, it's high quality, it gets really bright in the sunlight, and paired with some really nice touchscreen controls on the back of the camera, it works extremely well. I think you're going to love it. Please note, by the way, in case you didn't notice, this camera is more of a video camera though. There is no EVF that you can put your eye up to on a bright and sunny day. You are stuck with the screen. But hey, at least it's bigger and it looks great. Remember, if this camera is the FX3 killer, that camera doesn't have an EVF either, but this camera does have a bigger screen. Moving on then, let's talk about the weirdest feature of the ZR, something that I know is going to be polarizing and probably upset a decent amount of people, because when Nikon told me what they were doing with this camera, it was like that Ryan Reynolds meme, but why? Repeatedly in my head. Anyways, here it is. Open up the battery door of this camera and you're going to be presented with 2 memory card slots, which is great initially, right? You want 2 slots for potentially dual recording, right? Well, one of these slots is, as you would expect, a CF Express Type B card slot, enabling the camera to film in a massive variety of resolutions and formats, including RAW, which we're going to talk about very soon. But then you get to the other card slot buried down in here, and this isn't another CF Express Type B or even a normal SD card slot like 99% of other mirrorless cameras out there. No, it's a micro SD card slot that can only record H.264 or H.265 footage. But why? Now you know why that Ryan Reynolds meme was in my head. What were Nikon and RED thinking? What is the point of this? Were they trying to keep the size down of the camera so they didn't want to cram 2 CF Express card slots into it? I don't know. It's very confusing. Like I said, it's the weirdest feature of this camera that you are honestly going to have to really look past if you want to buy it, because it's just odd. Regardless of how you feel about it though, at the end of the day though, the micro SD card slot may not actually matter that much, because just like with other Nikon cameras, the ZR cannot record to both the memory card slots at the same time, and my suggestion to Nikon would be to add this in a firmware update. And even if the micro SD card slot could only record the proxy of the full resolution media being recorded to the CF Express Type B card slot, that could work really well, and I think that would be a good solution. So please join me in complaining to Nikon about this, and hopefully they will release a firmware update adding that capability. Anyways, wow, let's shift our talk now to something less weird. Look at the front of the ZR now, and you're going to see it unsurprisingly has the Nikon Z mount, meaning that it works with all Nikon lenses, as well as a massive variety of adapted lenses, including Sony, which is pretty cool. And then you get to the partially stacked full frame sensor with 7.5 stops of in-body image stabilization, dual ISOs at 800 and 6400, pretty darn good for low light, and this sensor can record video in up to 6K resolution at 60 frames per second in full frame, or 4K at 120 frames per second with a 1.5x crop. Pretty darn good, right? The FX3 can do 4K 120 FPS with only a 1.1x crop, so it's up to you if the 0.4x is worth it. But personally, I'm more of a 60 FPS guy anyways, so this isn't a big deal to me. And I hear you now saying, hold on, Matt, these Nikon sensor specs sound familiar. And you would be right, because this camera has essentially the same sensor as the Nikon Z6 III, a camera that I really love and have recommended to multiple people as the best choice if you're thinking of getting a Nikon camera. Forget the Z8 or Z9, save your money and get the Z6 III, which has a ton of the same features as those cameras, but is significantly cheaper. What's interesting, though, is that if you look at this camera as the, let's call it the cinema version of the Z6 III, made in collaboration with RED, it's got RED right here on the back, that makes it sound like it would be more expensive, right? Like Panasonic released the S1 for a cheaper price, then released the S1H that was more specialized for video for a higher price. Sony released the A7 IV for a cheaper price, but then the A7S III at a higher price. But wait, Nikon didn't do that? The Z6 III cost $2,500 at launch, and now here comes the ZR. Highly specialized for video, and it's going to be cheaper at $2,200. I'm not upset about it. Nikon is being really aggressive here with their pricing. Did I mention that makes this camera basically half the cost of an FX3 also? A camera that Sony recently raised the price of to $4,100. I'm just saying, y'all, that's crazy, and I like it. Anyways, let's get to the big enchilada, the headline feature of this camera, and why it carries not only the Nikon name, but also the RED name. We have to talk about RAW video, because of course this camera can record RAW internally, but did you know it can record 3 flavors of RAW? Literally the widest RAW support that I've ever seen in a camera. Up first, considering this is a Nikon camera and they've had their own flavor of RAW for many years now, it's no surprise this camera can record in the Nikon in RAW format. I really like this RAW format. It has looked gorgeous in all of my filming over the years with different Nikon cameras. It plays back easily in DaVinci Resolve. Great job, Nikon. I'm happy and completely unsurprised to see in RAW included in this camera. Next, you have the oddball format, let's call it. It's ProRes RAW. It's third party, so we're seeing this format available in more and more cameras these days, but the con of it is the rather middling support, let's say, from video editing software, so it's hard for me to recommend using this format. Last but not least, and here's the big one, the one that you were hoping for, the one that we've never seen outside of a box camera that says RED on it, which I guess this is also a camera that says RED on it, it's just not in a box shape. Is a rectangle a box? Crap, I think rectangle is actually a box. Anyways, the ZR supports recording the same RED RAW internally that you've gotten on all their other cameras, but I do want you to be aware that this flavor of RED RAW is limited to only 12-bit color, not 16-bit, and you cannot change the compression ratio, which is not a deal breaker to me. I have friends like Justin Porter that have sworn that switching from 12-bit Blackmagic RAW to 16-bit RED RAW was a massive difference, so if it is a deal breaker for you, I completely understand. But I want you to consider that this camera's footage is still going to mix better with other RED cameras than arguably any other camera has before, because the color science is the same. And I will just say again, remember the price. This is arguably the cheapest a RED camera has ever been, and there are shockingly few compromises with it. Speaking of few compromises though, there is unfortunately no sign of open gate recording or anamorphic lens D-squeeze support, but if we as filmmakers keep asking, maybe we'll get that along with dual card recording in a firmware update. We can hope and dream. Next, let's talk about one of the best features of this camera that I was hopeful we would see from this collaboration between RED and Nikon, and that is the inclusion of Nikon's incredible autofocus. I've absolutely loved Nikon's video autofocus with all their newer cameras, and I even made a tutorial about how to get the best settings for Nikon autofocus that I'll link to in the corner and in the description, because those settings apply to this camera as well. In short, the autofocus is fast, it's reliable, it can detect a wide variety of people, animals, and objects. It's on par with the autofocus you would get from Sony, Canon, etc., which is a great thing. I love it. And considering this is a RED camera, and RED has never really been known for having amazing autofocus, this is a massive step up in my opinion, and one of the best upgrades a RED camera has really ever received. Speaking of upgrades though, we need to talk about one of the biggest upgrades of all, because this is a unique feature that I've never seen in any other camera implemented in this way, which is, in my opinion, the best way. So I know you're gonna love this. I know that I do. The ZR supports 32-bit float audio recording internally. And you may be saying, Matt, you just hyped this up. Why is this a big deal? We've already seen cameras with this ability. Panasonic added it to all their newer cameras last year. I hear you, but Nikon and RED just implemented this better than anybody else. With those Panasonic cameras, you had to buy their separate $500 XLR hot shoe adapter to enable 32-bit float audio recording internally. And if you had any other camera like the FX3, you were stuck with recording 24-bit audio internally and needing to use a completely separate standalone audio recorder like this to get 32-bit float audio. But with the ZR, for the first time ever, you get 32-bit float audio recording through the 3.5mm microphone jack, meaning that if you have a shotgun mic or a lav mic, etc., you plug into this mic jack, you are getting 32-bit float audio. No adapter, no stress, just the best quality audio recording that you can get internally in this camera, keeping the size down and giving you a much more compact rig as well. I love it. I'm so glad to see it in this camera, and hopefully it will be in all future Nikon and RED cameras as well, please. Side note, by the way, here's something really cool. I also tested this 32-bit float audio recording support with the Hollyland Lark Max 2 microphone, which is the first wireless microphone to support what they are calling full chain 32-bit float audio recording, meaning that the transmitter right here is capable of transmitting 32-bit float audio to the receiver, and then that can connect to a computer or iPhone to record 32-bit float internally. But Hollyland had not said that it was compatible with any camera bodies, most likely due to no camera body supporting 32-bit float internally. That is until now. So I'm happy to tell you that if you run a Hollyland Lark Max 2 receiver into the mic jack of your Nikon ZR, you will be able to record full 32-bit float audio wirelessly directly into your camera, and it works incredibly well. I was able to recover an audio file that was peaked by over 20 decibels without issue. It's incredible. Now, because we were just talking about audio, I do want to touch on timecode support as well for the ZR. Just like how all previous Nikon cameras supported timecode over Bluetooth or HDMI using the Atomos series of timecode devices, this ZR supports it as well. Side note, yes, by the way, it is a micro HDMI port on the side, so you will need an adapter if you want to use an external monitor, but I gotta say, the 4-inch screen on this thing has me questioning if you would even need to. I personally don't use an external monitor when filming weddings and client work, so it's not a big deal to me. Anyways, if you want to use a different timecode system like Tentacle Sync or Deity, you'll have to use the camera microphone jack. There's unfortunately no dedicated timecode sync port on the camera. Moving on to arguably one of the most important parts of this review, especially if you're someone who films very long takes, like say at a wedding ceremony, especially if it's an outdoor wedding ceremony in the heat, we need to talk about overheating with the ZR, because surprisingly, in a rather shocking diversion from the FX3, which I still hold this camera set up very nicely to compete with, the FX3 has a fan to keep it cool, but the ZR does not. What? You may be shocked because pretty much all RED cameras up to this point have had a fan. How is this camera going to keep cool? How is it going to keep from overheating recording 6K raw video? That was my initial gut reaction to the ZR as well when they told me it didn't have a fan, but then I remembered. This camera shares the same sensor with the Z6 III, a camera that did not have a fan either, and whenever I tested that camera's overheating, I was shocked to see how well it performed. Capable of recording 6K 60 FPS raw video outdoors in the Texas heat for over 53 minutes before it finally overheated, which, yes, that is longer than the Panasonic S1 II, which has a fan inside it, by the way. So I knew whenever I tested the overheating performance of the ZR, it could go one of two ways. Either the camera would overheat very quickly, or it could be more like the Sony a7S III, a camera that does not have a fan either, but is also incredibly hard to make overheat due to the fantastic passive cooling internally. And my hope was that the ZR would be more like that camera. So of course, I had to test it. And you, dear viewer, you are lucky, by the way, because I live in Texas, and Nikon decided to let me test this camera in mid-August. Yes, the hottest month of the year, where temperatures regularly get up to 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. In short, the ultimate torture chamber for any camera. I took two ZR cameras outside with an outdoor temperature of 91 degrees that felt like 95, sun shining directly onto the body, absorbing all that infrared heat as well, with the camera overheat cutout setting turned to high, and one camera recording in RED RAW in 6K at 60 FPS, and the other in RED RAW in 6K at 24 FPS to simulate filming an outdoor wedding ceremony. If you're one of those people that likes to film your ceremonies in 6K at 60 FPS, we're testing it, baby. With this setup, the ZR recording in 6K at 60 FPS far surpassed even the Z6 III, recording for 1 hour and 21 minutes and 37 seconds before finally overheating and shutting down. An incredibly impressive time, with the camera battery meter turning red and only having 1 bar, meaning it was about to run out of battery and shut off on its own anyways. As for the second ZR camera recording in 6K at 24 FPS, it didn't even break a sweat. I had it record for 1 hour, 23 minutes and 30 seconds before the battery still had 2 bars left, and then I turned it off manually. It never gave me an overheat warning, and it showed no signs of being even remotely close to overheating. I only turned it off at that point because I was starting to overheat myself after being outside for an hour and a half at that point, and due to the camera showing no signs of overheating yet, I definitely think it would have lasted till the battery died easily. In summary, I'm so glad to say I was right. While the Nikon ZR doesn't have a fan, it's far closer in performance to the a7S III when it comes to overheating, which is a great thing. I think you could easily film even the hottest outdoor wedding ceremony with this camera on the hottest months of the year, even at 6K 60 FPS RAW without it overheating, which is fantastic news. So, should you buy the Nikon ZR? Well, I asked this question at the start of the review. Is the ZR an FX3 killer? And in many ways, yes, it is. It records in higher resolution, it can record in Nikon RAW and RED RAW, can record 32-bit float audio internally through just the 3.5mm mic jack, it has a bigger screen, and it has a very similar body style size to the FX3. But it doesn't have dual memory card recording, with one of the card slots being a very weird choice by Nikon, a micro SD card slot, and it doesn't have a fan, which I understand may make some filmmakers nervous, even though it performed extremely well in my testing. And so, as I've spent time with this camera, I mentioned earlier, it feels like there's more Nikon DNA here than RED, aside from the RED RAW codec. And I think there are going to be a lot of RED diehard filmmakers out there that may be annoyed by this. But for me, coming from using more Nikon cameras, this feels more familiar. I really like it. Then you have the price. Nikon tells me this camera is priced at $2,200, which is absolutely wild to me. It's cheaper than the ZX3 when it came out. It's the cheapest a RED camera has ever been. And I remember back in 2009 when I bought my first DSLR, a Canon 7D for $1,600. There were rumors swirling around back then that RED was working on a budget cinema camera, a camera that could record 3K resolution for $3,000. 3K for 3K. Well, that camera eventually turned into the RED Scarlett, and it definitely was not $3,000. Try triple that. But I've always remembered that rumored camera, and here we are, over a decade and a half later. Nikon has acquired RED, and they've just released a camera capable of filming in 6K for $2,200. 6K for 2.2K doesn't have the same ring to it that 3K for 3K did, but it's also better in every way. And whenever you look at everything you're getting with the ZR for $2,200, and you put that up next to the FX3, which currently costs almost double the price at $4,100, it's really hard for me to not call this an FX3 killer. It's such a good package. You can let me know if you agree in the comments. Also, while you're down there, I will link in the description to my Nikon autofocus cheat sheet that's going to show you the best settings for video autofocus for your Nikon camera. You can download it completely for free. I highly recommend checking it out. Please like this video and subscribe if you want to see more videos about cool cameras like this from the perspective of someone who wants to help you make money filmmaking with them. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.